Pleasure. You could stay on. I am Pius Kojo Baka. Let's now start off from the IMF because stabilizing the global economy, banking system and rising debts of developing countries. And of course, these are the issues to dominate the annual World Bank IMF spring meeting, which is set to officially open in Washington, D.C. Joy Businesses George Yafe will join us pretty soon with more on that. But speaking ahead of that meeting, Managing Director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said about 15% of low-income countries are already in debt distress and another 45% face high debt vulnerabilities.
I want to make a double plea on their behalf. Help them handle the burden of debt, which has made life in this country so much harder because of multiple shocks in the last years. And secondly, help ensure that the IMF continues to be in a position to support them in the years ahead. Let me start with debt. About 15% of low-income countries are in debt distress, an additional 45% are near it. About a quarter of emerging market economies are at high risk, facing default-like borrowing costs. And this has raised a legitimate concern about the potential wave of debt restructuring cases.
And we've got to go back to our earlier story where the IMF and, of course, the World Bank spring meeting will be happening tomorrow. And my colleague, George Yafe, pretty sure has gotten a better connection and joins me live from Washington, D.C. to update us with the latest on that. Grateful, George, you could join me on the marketplace. I earlier asked you to give us, an update on basically what this World Bank IMF meeting will all entail.
Hello, Lawrence, can you hear me? Sorry, can you hear me? Yeah, so,
my data.
If you can hear me, I mean, how critical this meeting is? It's very critical because it is bringing together almost all the central bank governors and then finance ministers from around the world, deliberate on issues that matter so much to the global economy. We heard earlier on the IMF talking about rising debt of emerging markets, not just developing countries, and that is another issue that is going to dominate discussion. So this meeting is actually called the of all finance. What they can do to ensure that the global economy is quite safe. That is their job.
All right, so what are the key issues that are likely to dominate these meetings, George?
Well, in your preamble, you spoke about the debt issues, and it has been a big concern for the IMF. And why is it a big concern? Because of the contagion. You think that Ghana having a debt issue is not a problem. Why should we care? Because don't forget that Ghana has borrowed from some banks, we borrowed from some international financiers as well. And any delay in settling these debts could have a rippling impact on other economies. That is why the IMF is working on this partner to contain or deal with these rising debt issues of all these. It doesn't get out of hand. When I talk about the global economy, there's talk about US going into a recession. There's also talk about UK. And for you, some would say that, and so what? Or why should I care? But when these countries go into recession, there has serious impact on demand for our commodities. So what can the IMF do together with the World Bank try and mitigate the shocks of these economies going into recession and how it doesn't have serious impact on developing countries like Ghana? That is why one, to look at how they can protect the global economy in terms of possible threats of countries or these huge economies going into recession, and also the global issues with US. There's an impression that what again can be done to ensure that these shocks are contained and doesn't get out of hand. And also the debt issues as well. And that is why for most people in Ghana will be interested in, because Ghana's debt stock has been described as unsustainable. That is why the IMF MD is leading a campaign to engage the G24 countries, China, and even the Paris Club, if they can take the steps to help restructure the debt stock of countries like Ghana.
George, I'm struggling to hear you, but I want to find this from you. Is Ghana's delegation in town? And of course, what next
yes,
after this
of
meeting?
course. They are already in town, both those who are coming from the Ministry of Finance, the Bank of Ghana, and also other actors as well. The actors and parliamentarians in town. Those are the World Bank Forum as well. So they are in town. This meeting is very, very critical for Ghana because government is hoping that the behind-the-scenes engagement, they can fast-track negotiations on Ghana's program that should be approved by the board. Don't forget that all the actors in Ghana was already engaged in the G4 countries, the the Paris.
All right, we've lost George there. We shall connect back to him as and when we get a better feed, and of course, he updating us on the latest in Washington, D.C. It is a better time we have to connect with the an economist and also a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Coast Business School, Siriam Kawo, for his perspective on this matter. Grateful, Mr. Kawo, you could join me on the marketplace. As you rightly heard, George, the issues to dominate the meetings would have to do with debt, sustainability, and of course, the banking system across all emerging economies. Now, how keen should Ghana be on this?
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's an issue where the government of Ghana would have to look at how they are going to convince the other creditors to buy into their situation. And so what is currently going to happen is that, as Wefi has said, there's going to be a lot of engagement with these creditors once they are in the US to determine how they will be able to help the country, Ghana.
So, how strategic would you say our delegation would have to be in this regard?
Yeah, so this issue will be that we need to have various, so that the teams will be able to meet the various countries. There is the need for us also to in order to convince these countries to help us out. And also, we need to share with them the various measures that we have taken as a country to ensure that this is not repeated in the future.
Quite recently, the World Bank, came out with the report indicating that there's not been any progress made in, Ghana's quest to, settle the issues when it comes to the debt restructuring with its external creditors. And going into the IMF World Bank Spring meeting, how do you think things will be playing out?
Yeah, so that report that came out is a bit worrying for us in Ghana, because that easily shows that our leaders were not up to the task. They've not been doing the engagement that they need to make. And so it's a great opportunity for them to ensure that they meet these people. And I'm very sure that delegation from Ghana, including Bank of Ghana, are in the US to meet these countries. And so there is a lot of power play in place. The political dynamics, the geopolitics of the world will be playing a role. And so Ghana will need to position itself in a way that it will not be seen as siding with a particular country, especially when Russia, China form the BRICS and other countries that are fighting the US. And so this very issue is very important for all of us, so that our delegation would now show some bit of commitment They go there with data. They don't go there with empty hands. So that when they are speaking to the data that is available to them.
Now, let me take you back to a comment made by the managing director of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, basically appealing to members of G20 and, of course, the Paris Club to, forgive countries that, have issues with debt. And, of course, Ghana is of no exception. Do you think that message will sink down well to them, especially in this era of the IMF World Bank Spring meetings?
All right. Thank you very much. If the executive director is pleading with other developed countries to help the emerging developing economies for debt, let me term it restructuring, where some debt will be forgiven or a reduction in the interest rate or grace period will be given for these countries. It also implies that the board should be ready to help some of these countries so that they also borrow from IMF. And so there should be some concessions that will be made from time to time. It's not a matter of just coming out on air and then pleading with these individuals. IMF itself must make some commitment by meeting these countries and telling them the plans that they have. And in actual fact, the statement or the plea by the director for IMF simply shows that if we do not work with these emerging economies, they are the people that we make the money from. And if we allow them to go down, it will affect the entire world economy. And for that matter, let us all of us work together to ensure that we make provisions and sustain this country so that we can all be in business. And humanity is going to play a role here. We have a lot of hunger, unemployment around the world. Pandemics have endeavored us. And so this is the time for world leaders to show some amount of leadership and put humanity first. In that light, I am sure the plea might be able to work.
Are you suggesting that the IMF hasn't done that so far?
They might have done that. They might have done that. I'm not by way saying that that has not been done. But what I'm saying is that after that plea, Ghana needs to go back to the IMF and get a member of the IMF board that are from some of these countries to talk to the power brokers to ensure that we get this deal successfully. We don't just have to sit back and tell ourselves that, oh, they have pleaded with them, so they are going to accept what they have said. That might not be the situation. We need to be more strategic in whatever we do. And so going back to ask the board members, and in fact, by this time, we should have even contacted every board member of the IMF, telling them our plans and getting their views and incorporating it into whatever that we are doing. The backroom maneuvers, the backroom negotiations and strategies are very keen, and we shouldn't leave any stone unturned when we want to get this particular deal, which is very critical to the development of our country, Ghana.
Sarah, there is this growing uncertainty as to when we will get a deal. But from where you sit, do you think we can get a deal?
It's going to be very difficult. But from where I'm sitting and what we have seen, that all the conditions that have been set out in terms of the domestic revenue mobilization, when Parliament has passed the bill, there is a lot of kickbacks on this particular issue where industry is not buying into it. The consultative meeting that needs to be held is not done. And so for now, we don't know whether the president has assented his signature to it, making it into law, because that will be required as evidence. Then we also have to convince the G20 countries, that's the Paris Club, to give us some firm assurance that they are ready to help us out. Then we have to go back to China and get a deal from China as well, so that we can present all these things to the board. It is possible when you look at the pronouncement by the country director of IMF in Ghana, in Africa, and then the IMF executive directors themselves, they are committed to it. But it's not just going to come on a silver platter. It's going to take some time for us to get it. You know, last year when this issue came up, we said that it is not likely that Ghana will get it in the next quarter. Yeah. And so the quarter has ended. So roughly we should be targeting this quarter somewhere in June or August for us to get the deal going through.
What are the expectations of the economy if positive signals are given by the IMF about Ghana securing the deal?
Yeah, the positive issues that will come up with is that a lot of the things that we do are imported, and so we depend solely on the exchange rate for some of these things. Businesses at the port are not flourishing. So when you look at what happened on the news file the last time, we are being told that port activities have reduced. A lot of the importers are not able to import most of the things. If you go to the spare parts dealers, they are not ready, they are not able to travel. Their capital has reduced over time. Some people have actually lost their jobs and their businesses through this particular one. So the positive thing that will come up is that once the dollar is coming in, exchange rate will stabilize, somehow reduced. That will also help us in the oil or the fuel that we import for our various activities. In that way, we'll have prices of items on the market going down. If inflation comes down, that will positively affect everybody that we have, everybody in the country. And so that way, it will help us. But then if it is just a word of mouth that we are talking about and these things will not materialize, then that will not do well for us. And also, our leaders, if these things are also going to help us, our leaders need to share with us the programs that they have. They need to have a wider consultative meeting. They need to listen to civil society, other political parties, those in academia, so that the ideas that we bring up, all these things should be incorporated. We need to have a lot of education on how we are going to go forward, so that these funds, when they come, we are not going to misuse it, especially when we are going to enter into an election year, when we know that political parties are only interested in political power, and so there will be a lot of expenditure that they are going to incur. But my hope is that once IMF is coming in, these things will be monitored and Ghana will be the winner.
Thank you very much, Seriam Kawo. He is a senior lecturer at the University of Cape Coast Business School, sharing his comprehensive analysis on the World Bank IMF spring meetings in Washington, D.C. And Trust Joy Business, we shall be bringing you up to the minute on every latest development in that part of the country for you.